Math time with Ms. Hartzell, Module 7, Lesson 24. I can answer questions and analyze data on a line plot graph. Now that you're familiar with line plot graphs, we are going to analyze these graphs further. Because as you know, when we are looking at data, we don't just collect the information and organize it into a graph, we also analyze it. And that means that we look really close at the data and we find comparisons or differences between measurements or the different amount of data in one category than another category. So stay tuned as we go through some examples of how to do this work. It'll be very similar to the work we did when we looked at picture graphs and bar graphs. However, this time we'll be looking at line plot graphs. So before we get to our work today, let's pause and think about what we know about line plot graphs. So during this section of your video, you'll take a look at another line plot graph and you will take a look at what information is given to you in that graph. Have a great time today getting your line plot graph knowledge on. Now that you're more familiar with line plot graphs, take a look at this graph. What information can we learn from this graph? Look at all of the different parts of this graph, and when you're finished thinking about what we can learn, press play. So these are the three graphs that we've learned about in second grade. Bar graphs, as we know, are used to compare data. We do this by coloring rectangles and looking at how those different rectangles compare to the different categories. We've just recently learned about line plot graphs, and we show data by using a number line and x's. The x's show how often the data is occurring, or we can say the frequency of the data. And the last graph that we learned about was the pictograph or the picture graph, which shows us data by using a picture and a legend that explains what that picture means. So today we're going to continue focusing on line plot graphs and get better at analyzing and answering questions about that type of graph. So just like when I made the line plot graph yesterday, line plot graphs need number lines. The numbers that are labeled on the number line are the categories for that particular graph. The x's that you see in the line plot graph, that is the data, or showing how frequent the categories are. We also like to include titles and labels so that when a reader or somebody who is looking at our graph, so that they know what the information is about. This graph is not well titled or labeled because they're mostly just trying to show you the important parts of a line plot graph, the x's and the number line. It's very important that we include those in our line plot graph. So let's take a look at a real line plot graph with data. This line plot graph is about candy bars and how many students have sold different amounts of candy bars. Now that we know what the x's and the number line is showing, we can answer some questions about this graph. And I want to know how many students sold 5 candy bars. I want to know the frequency. How many times did students sell 5 candy bars? So when I look at the graph, I need to focus my eyes on the number of candy bars, that's 5. And the x's that are above the number 5, that's how many students were able to sell 5 candy bars. So to answer this question, how many students sold 5 candy bars? It's 4. 4 students sold candy bars. And I know this because when I look in the category of 5, I look at the number of X's labeled in that category, and I counted 4 X's. So 4 students sold 5 candy bars. Let's work on a tougher question. And we have a new line plot graph. This graph is about the heights of plants in inches. So I want to know how many more plants were 1 inch than 3 inches. So to do this work, I have to look at more than one category. I have to focus my eyes on the 1 inch category and the 3 inch category. And then I also need to focus on how many X's are in each of those categories. I noticed that in the 1 inch category, when plants were 1 inch, that happened 6 times. When I look at the category for the 3 inch plants, that happened 5 times. So if I want to know how many more plants were 1 inch than 3 inches, I would need to find the difference between the frequencies. I will need to take 6 minus 5. And when I solve that very simple subtraction equation, I find the difference of 1. So to answer the question, how many more plants were 1 inch than 3 inches, I can answer it like this. There was 1 more plant that was 1 inch than 3 inches. So today in your daily practice, you will answer questions just like the ones we've gone over today. Sometimes they may be very straightforward, where you'll look at a category and you'll count how many X's are in that category. But as you know, we also can answer more complex questions like how many more by looking at 2 different categories and comparing how those frequencies are different. So do your best today on your daily practice and your exit ticket. Have a great day.